with the shocking news that was announced earlier this week that General Motors will be retiring the Holden brand at the end of this year. As three of the most prominent and decorated ambassadors of Holden, I know it's come as a great shock and disappointment to all of you, and we've been talking about that so far this week. I suppose as ambassadors and having been at the forefront of this company for such a long time, you're highly engaged with the industry, with past and present employees and with the fans. What's the reaction been that you've received off the back of this announcement?
Well, it's been extraordinary, Jess. I mean, no one saw it coming. It's just, it's rocked the nation. It's one of those things that I never thought in our lifetimes that we'd ever have a situation in this country with the landscape that we wouldn't have Holden. And when you think about the iconic nature of that brand and how ingrained it's been in our psyche, there's pretty much every family in this country's got some sort of Holden story, guys, haven't they? You know, everyone you talk to, my dad had a Holden Ute, or my mum's first car was a Tirana, or whatever it was. So I think on that side of the coin, there's been an incredible reaction from the public as to how Holden touched the local community and what it meant to Australia. And then the second part really is, what about all those people, hundreds of thousands of people that have been through their career as Holden people, whether they've been people on the assembly line at Elizabeth here in Adelaide, they've been at the Lang Lang Proving Ground, they've been in the engine plant at Fisherman's Bend, they've been at dealerships all around the country. So there's a large contingent of Australians and New Zealanders that have been part of this Holden story, and it's really rocked the place.
Yeah, absolutely. And I thought someone was playing a rude joke. It was 1st of April or something when I heard about it, and you know, I had to check on that one. And you're right, Skaife, and including New Zealand in this one as well. I mean, how popular, we all know how popular supercars are in New Zealand, and how very popular Holden and Ford have been in the fabric of New Zealand society as well for such a long time. And, you know, talking to dealers on Tuesday, Holden dealers that have been, you know, such supporters of the brand for so long, and the amount of people that we have met through the dealerships and at, as you say, Lang Lang, and at the factory, and just the passion behind it. And I spoke to some that you could tell that they were shell-shocked. I mean, these are guys that have been in the industry for such a long period of time. And again, the staff that they've got, some of them have been there for 20, 25, 30 years, guys that are working in these dealerships. And that straight away, the first people you start to think of about it. And it has been something, it's been very surreal, hasn't it? Because it actually, I don't think it really has sunk in how big this is for all of us, and especially those people.
Well, I spent 90% of my racing career inside a Holden Commodore, and you know, you grow up with the iconic, you know, emblem of the lion and everything else, and you just, as you said, you wouldn't predict when we first got involved in motor racing that we'd be talking about this issue right now. And as Murph said, it's not only just the fans, it's all the dealers and all the people that have actually built their careers and lives around this. And you know, it was devastating. I was flying over here, I got the news as I was leaving Brisbane. Of course, when you land 3 hours later, it was wildfire, like it was everywhere.
We were at the test day yesterday, Craig, and you know, there are a lot of fans that turned up, I guess, they wanted to connect, particularly with you and all of the Holden drivers here, and it was all anyone was talking about. It's really reverberating right around communities, the wider community around New Zealand too. In government, we bumped into Scott Morrison, who was here in Adelaide last night. He had a talk to you, Skaife, about it. There isn't any one person that this hasn't affected or touched in Australia. It's extraordinary.
Yeah, and look at this, it's criticism about how some of the things were handled, and certainly not talking to government probably didn't go over very well with the Prime Minister, and I sort of sympathise with that. And a little bit of it, Jess, and we look through these beautiful images of Holden heroes and the people that have meant so much to the brand, but when you do think about the decision-making, where it comes from in reality is right-hand drive architecture. So for General Motors worldwide, less than 1% of their cars are right-hand drive. They've pulled out of England, they've pulled out of Japan, they've sold their German base with the Opel, so they don't have right-hand drive cars. Second part is that once upon a time in this country, and this is a bit that blows me away, I would have never said that our market share would have been less than Toyota's. Not only is it less than Toyota's, it's back at roughly 3%. And when you think about 1 in 4 people in this country used to buy Holdens, almost 25% of the market have come back to 1 in 30. So, you know, there's a lot of, I know we're all emotional and we understand the decision making, there's a lot of common sense from GM in a brand that really wasn't selling cars here.
The economics of it, and when you put into context that Chevrolet in America sell 700,000 Silverados a year versus the numbers that we're doing is, say, 1% right-hand drive. I mean, it just unfortunately got to a point where it didn't stack up.
Yep.
And from the New Zealand side of things, we're actually doing a bit better over there with the brand as well. It's currently sitting around 8% its market share, which isn't a bad number. But when you look at how many cars we sell in New Zealand, new cars a year, it's just over 100,000, and you've got 8% of that. It just makes it so difficult.
Yeah. I want to bring Neil Crompton into the conversation now. Welcome back, Crompo. I know any young racing car driver wanted to be a factory-backed Holden driver, and I know that that's something the four of you all share in common. Did you ever think we'd see the day that Holden would be no more?
Afternoon to you, Jess. Good afternoon to the panel. No, I think all of us, Greg, Craig, Mark, myself, we all grew up coveting the notion that one day, we might be Holden factory drivers. We were very lucky individuals and we got to live that dream. We got to drive with people like Peter Brock and various other members of the panel there over the years. And to be able to be part of that whole story over decades, and stop and think about it, Holden have been directly investing in motorsport in this country for more than 50 years. So certainly massive amount of emotion when that disappears for us. But I think there's a couple of other really key points to make here. The globalisation train is not stopping. Greg was talking about numbers, Mark was talking about numbers. You talk about individual dealers in the United States that sell more cars as individuals than almost the entire Australian market. And so there's no hiding from it. And I don't think we've seen the end of General Motors having a presence in this market here. And I certainly don't think that we've seen the end of rivalry in this pit lane. And despite the fact that the Lion and the Ball are going to disappear as we know it, I think that you'll find that there's still more to the story. But I spoke to Mark earlier in the week and we were just sombre, quite frankly, and wondering, okay, what does this all mean? And I said to, and I'm sure MS is nodding in the background there at the moment, it's not as though to a degree we didn't see this coming. When you stop and think about the way the sales have gone, where the management team's drifted to, some of the decisions that have been made along the way, pointing the bone at that doesn't make sense. But the problem is, when what has occurred unfolds, it doesn't make it any easier. So despite the fact that we possibly had some forward knowledge on this, it's still really heart-wrenching and it's quite dismaying to have to live through.
I know, first and foremost, we're all thinking, the entire category, everyone here in the pit lane and the paddock are thinking about the fans, the dealers, the employees of Holden who will lose their jobs. But I guess in the context of supercars, the burning question, Crompo, that all the fans have is, what does this decision now mean for the category?
Well, I think first and foremost, we've got to stop and think about some of the facts that are involved in this conversation. Factually, supercars in recent years has had fantastic growth. Great growth on television, on Fox, great audience attendances, great motor racing. Obviously, that story will always go up and down. And in the background, there's a group of people that have been working on what's being described as Gen 3 for a long period of time. Even at the airport this morning, I had people saying to me in Sydney as I came across to Adelaide, does this mean the end of supercars? Absolutely, 150% no. Supercars will continue on into the future. The racing will be great. We will find a way. We need to find relevant cars, a relevant product that maintains the excitement that people have loved over decades, and there's a lot of people working hard in the background that will do that. So we obviously are not going to reveal details about that today, tomorrow, in the coming hours, but it's not far away from understanding what that's going to look like. And yeah, look, I think all I can say from my side of the fence is that there's a lot of people working hard to ensure that there's not just a full stop on the end of the Holden story. But I think we, and the panel there have already touched on it, we just don't want to jump over the fact that there's a lot of people affected beyond just all of us in this little community in here at the moment. We don't want to have a myopic view of the universe. There's a greater story here and there's a lot of people being affected, and we need to stop and pause and reflect on that.
Indeed we do. I guess, you know, we're here in the pit lane now. We were out at the test day yesterday talking to all of the teams and the drivers. There is a lot of uncertainty in the pit lane around what the future is going to look like, but rest assured, everyone's ready to go racing. It all kicks off here tomorrow. I guess for the fans, you know, they've got a lot of questions, and particularly those Holden fans who have bled red for such a long time. It's really important for them to know that we're still with them and that the show will go on.
No doubt. And you think through the course of history, Jess, you know, we've had Mini Miners win Bathurst, we've had Jaguars win Bathurst, we've had Volvo win the Touring Car Championship, we've had Ford Sierras dominate, we've had Nissan GTRs and BMWs dominate this series. So the reality around which car company comes and plays at the time, although it's heart-wrenching and we understand how much Holden have contributed, what Neil said a second ago about the growth of the sport on TV and with our events, whilst Holden's market share has declined, really means that a lot of the customers, our customers, people that are here this weekend, just weren't buying the cars.
Yep.
So that's actually the harsh reality. They love the sport.
And we've got very used to having such an incredible competition and such amazing passion between two. It's been static, longer than maybe just about any other motorsport category in the world for such a long time. We've been spoiled, absolutely spoiled.
Totally.
Yeah. I know that there's a lot of anxious people in and around Australia here at the racetrack as well. They want their questions answered. We haven't yet heard from the Supercars CEO, Sean Seamer, but we've got him standing by for us with Crompo.
And it does beg the question, Jess, as to what happens next. Sean with me at the moment. Clearly devastating news for the industry, but not the end of the world.
No, obviously it's been a big week for us, the Holden family, its employees and dealers, but we've been planning for 2022. Obviously, we knew we weren't going to have the Holden past the end of next year. So for us now, really, it's about moving, looking forward, ascertaining out of what are those plans that we had in place, what could and should be brought forward into next year, and working with all of our partners and stakeholders on that. Obviously, GM and Holden are those stakeholders as well, but they're quite rightly focused on their people and their dealers right now. So we just have to be a little bit patient.
And you've got a group of people working in the background on the next generation of supercar, which has been happening long before this conversation and involves a whole range of topics.
Yeah, absolutely. Every business has to change and adapt. Ours is absolutely no different. So we've been working through a plan to make sure that we have market relevance, not just today, but into the future as well. And no matter what happens, I can tell you we'll be here next year and the year after, putting on the best show in town, being fast, being loud and banging doors and trading paint.
All right. Thanks for the word, Sean.
Cheers.